All right, folks, welcome to the latest edition of the American Praetorians live stream. We're going to be a little bit less slack ops this month because we're talking about some serious stuff this month. Namely,
you didn't tell me it was going to be serious. I got all my jokes written.
well, I mean, see, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, because we should be mercilessly mocking communists and fascists and authoritarians of all stripes, particularly the nerdy ones that come out of the woodwork and insist that the republic has failed and therefore we need dictators.
Whoa. It sounds like you're one of them Civ Nattery types that are
apparently so.
All against any form of authoritarianism, which sucks
Apparently
and makes everything easier, including fucking up.
You need to print out that review and hang it on your wall behind you for these.
Just hanging on his bookshelf behind him, not so that that's where he wants it. It's just that so every stream where you bring it up, everybody can kind of understand the reference instead of the inside baseball that it is.
Yeah. For those who don't know, and I'm not sure how many don't know at this point, about when that was 4 years ago, wasn't it, Mike?
Yeah, it was 2020.
Yeah. We put out an anthology based in the Maelstrom Rising series. And the very first review was a 1-star from one of these same weirdos we're going to be belittling tonight that was insisting that I was, he was just tired of my Civ Nettery, which we had to look up and find out what the blazes he was talking about, because that is not a real word. I think
it's
Mike, didn't you find out what it was?
Yeah, I looked it up. It was it means civic nationalism, which is where you have a sense of your country based on your institutions and laws, and like the United States of America, versus ethnic nationalism, where you have a nation based on your bad understanding of genetics and you've never done a 23andMe, so you think you're part of the white race or the master race or whatever.
Well, apparently, like, none of us are, because every time we get into arguments with these guys, they're always just like, well, you're not really white.
Yeah.
My grandfather on my mom's side, like, fought the Russians in the Finnish Civil War because there was, like, a faction that was aligned with the Russians, and that's when they were trying to get independence from Russia. And so I don't know. Is that like the Finnish language descended from Hindi? Like, I don't know who traveled from India to Finland, but so
no, it's Finno-Ugric, which is its own thing.
That's our word.
I called you a Sami.
Oh, and also, apparently I have a little bit of Asian in me, which you could have fooled me. I'm terrible at math.
Did you take it out? Well, all right, look. Everybody says Asians are great at math, but you ask a Japanese guy what comes after 7:30, and they'll never answer it. They just shut up.
Yeah, sometimes it's a good thing that we're not monetized on it.
You could be. I just can't be on the show.
It's too much of a pain. We have to watch what we say, and some of what we say, even the serious stuff, is not popular with the overlords.
You can't even say like suicide. You have to say self-delete, or that's what the kids tell me.
I refuse to do that. That's retarded. I'm going to say it.
No, you're allowed to say retarded. We reclaimed that word. It's our word now.
So anyway,
Korean is. Somebody in the comments said apparently Korean is related to Finnish, not Asian languages. Yeah,
I don't believe that. I know there's a theory going around that. I don't believe it.
It's a result of the Finno-Korean hyper war 12,000 years ago. So
made possible with the Samsung time machine.
Yeah. So the subject is
intro?
Yeah. So before we got sidetracked, which we probably will many more times tonight, we have all three of us noticed, and I'm sure some of you in the audience have noticed the same thing, that there seems to be a growing amount of what Yuri Bezmenov, who is in the thumbnail of this episode, called demoralization. Mainly, it seems that nobody on either side of this political spectrum in this country actually believes in the United States as the United States anymore. In fact, the title of this little talk, Demoralization versus Patriotism, when's the last time you heard the term patriotism actually used in any kind of, actually used at all in the last like 5-6 years, let alone
last month when the Olympics were going on?
Yeah, I don't think that really counts.
I don't know. All right, we're putting a we're fighting against this stuff, and we're proving all these black pillars wrong, right? Everybody's still rooting for their country when it comes to the Olympics, unless somebody on a team in a specific event does something stupid like some woke bullshit or tries breakdancing or whatever. like except for those individual cases, everybody's still kind of rooting for their home country, you know?
I personally think a lot of this stuff is a bit, right? Yeah, like I told you guys earlier, we're on like our third Flight 93 election in a row now. You know, it's like some of this stuff, especially on your large social media accounts, I think it's just bullshit to hype the followers up, because that's how you get your reclicks or your retweets and your clicks and your subscriptions and all that. That's how you make your money. So you get your Elon bucks, you know. And there's a lot of disaffected young internet people out there. Yeah, professional writer right here.
Well, you know what you can do is you can just say, you can just make something up and just say Democrats don't want you to share this, and then you'll get a bunch of.
Here's the thing, though, is that a lot of these people broadcasting this crap may actually not believe in any of it, but they're getting a whole lot of other people to believe in it.
Yes,
and I think we've all run into some of those people in real life as well as online. That the real life part, if it's online, you can kind of dismiss it because as Dave Chappelle says,
still in line at the door with you.
As Dave Chappelle says, Twitter is not a real place, but it's leaked out into the real world. Kind of like a lot of the woke stuff leaked off of Tumblr into the real world about 9-10 years ago.
So here's the thing, like, Twitter isn't a real place for like anybody over the age of 25, right? But for the people under 25, it might be a real place because like this is their lives. Like they are all online, unless they were specifically raised or did their own teenage rebel thing where they like unplugged completely. For a lot of these kids, and I'm not saying all of them, but like for a lot of these kids, like their entire lives are online. So like Twitter is just as valid to them as anywhere else. You know, that they like that it's as valid to them as like the video game lobbies that they hang out with their friends in, or like on the street corner if they have one and hang out with their friends there. You know what I mean? Yeah, like there is a generational gap here. And that's why like young people are stupid. They're capable of so much shit and they have so much potential, but like everybody's kind of let them down and they got nowhere else to go except for the internet and stupid fucking rabbit holes that way.
Part of the problem with that too, because that's true, is that believing it's the internet zeitgeist is real doesn't make it real. So when these guys get all hyped up over something, they're like, "It's happening," the Ron Paul meme, and then it doesn't happen. It just blows their minds. It has to be there's a conspiracy. There's the elites didn't let it happen. It's like, no, it was never gonna happen. You guys just live in a very weird little bubble. I mean, that's not unique to like internet weirdos. That's like the entire mainstream media is in this ridiculous bubble. And they were all on Twitter until Elon bought it. Now they're over on Blue Sky, where they can talk to each other in an even smaller bubble and nobody picks on them. So it's
Joke's on them. We have people on Twitter who are screen capping them and sharing them on Twitter.
Yeah.
So we get to laugh at them there. I will say this.
And Keith Olbermann can't quit Twitter either.
Twitter is a fucking retarded cesspool, but it's also hilarious, and I'm never leaving that site.
I can't leave it now. It's so funny. Plus, I have met some genuinely good people on there, like some real solid dudes. It's just, man, it is an open air asylum.
But it's the PvP server of social media.
Uh-oh. Well, guys, either they both froze up or I did.
Which is
it's doing that.
It's better than, I suppose it's better than Facebook at this point, which you think Twitter is a lost cesspool. Scroll through Facebook for about 2 minutes.
Yeah, so Facebook is like going the way of the dodo. It's mainly just people posting like using it as kind of like a family friendly Instagram where they just post their like life pics and all that stuff and wish each other happy birthday and then don't interact with anybody any other way except for the people who are like way too curmudgeon-y and like behind of the times to switch over to Twitter. So that's why it's a lot of like the boomers and like the 50-year-old divorced dad guy that looks down his phone like that for his profile pic, that demographic. And I'm sorry to anybody who takes offense to that because I use Facebook a lot, but Twitter is way more fun.
I mean, seriously, the three of us met on Facebook. They're not like, I'm not like hating the concept of Facebook. I met my wife on Facebook.
No, it's a different thing than it used to be. Like
Facebook is where normal people went to just talk about their lives.
Yeah.
And
social media it's just the medium by which a user base interacts, right? That's why Tumblr is just fucking WordPress for like absolute spurgs, But Tumblr was its own thing, even though it worked exactly like WordPress, right?
Until they banned porn and then all the Tumblrinas.
Yeah, and then they came over to Twitter and it was terrible until Elon bought it. So,
but if anyone was wondering, I got a good example of what we are talking about here as far as the demoralization go. Let me see if I can pull this up. You guys see that?
There we go.
So it's difficult for the right to hear this, but it's true, and more people need to accept it. The country you're patriotic about is gone. The thing that took its place is shameful and deserves to be destroyed. You're going to have to rebuild something to be proud of.
See, this is funny. This is Pedro Gonzalez. He's a big Twitter guy.
Didn't he tweet this like years ago?
Yeah, this is like four years old. Ever since then, he started to try to walk it back because he tried to ingratiate himself with like the DeSantis people this year, and this part of this ecosystem of freaks that he helped build turned on him for not being loyal to Trump, right? And it was kind of hilarious. I mean, guy's his mom is from Spain, but he hates immigration. He's one of those, right? So this is a good example, though. But Pedro doesn't really believe this. I don't think it's just red meat for the audience. The problem is there are people who follow him that do, especially young, gullible people.
Like me.
Yes, like you.
I'm just kidding. I'm not young. But...
Relatively speaking.
If you say so. But, I mean, yeah, you'll see that a lot on both sides. Like you were saying that every election for the past, 3 cycles has been the Flight 93 election, where it is the most important thing ever. And if you don't vote for whichever candidate that they want, everything's going to be destroyed, and it's post-apocalyptic after that. How many times, how many other strategies are going to get people out to the polls? Like, who has ever mobilized voters by being like, if it happens, it happens. It's not that important. Nobody, right? So this is why they're using those strategies and that stuff. I'm not saying it's right, but it's like, guys, like be aware of the marketing techniques before you buy the product.
Right. Definitely.
REO sperm wagons. The thing is, though, a lot of this isn't being done by the campaigns. They're doing some of it, but I haven't heard anybody actually from the Trump campaign talk about some of the things I've seen Trump's fans talk about. The people are more emotionally invested in the political campaigns than the politicians themselves. None of them believe it's over forever if they lose. They all have long-term ambitions and backup plans, because they're not insane. Okay.
Well, they're also hired guns. Like, they can just easily go join the other team.
Well, the politicians themselves, though, if they lose one election, it's not.
They're also hired guns. Yeah.
Well, like Trump. Remember what they were saying about what happened if Trump lost in 2020? Well, here we are again, 4 years later.
I know it sucks. I can't afford shit.
Yeah. As the other thing is, as John pointed out earlier, is a lot of these people who are, as you put it, Trump's fans, or at least playing the role of Trump's fans, are not even Americans. While Ian Miles Chungus appears.
Yep.
Which again is part of the problem. Is that
that's not just part of the problem. Ian Miles Chung is a problem. Like, he's its own problem.
Ian Miles Chung,
he's an entire problem in and of himself.
Yeah.
He's like the most hated person on Twitter, and that's hilarious. Because
and rightfully so.
Yes.
But here's the thing: the reason he's still popular is because he just steals everybody else's shit, and so it's like it's kind of treated with the meme logic, where like I don't have to track down where a meme came from and then credit the original, Photoshop artist from 2014. I'm just going to share it, right? So that's what people do with the provocative and like attention-grabbing information and stuff that he shares. He just stole it from somebody else, right? So they're just trying to get whatever the message is or bring awareness to whatever he's posting. They're just trying to spread that. Sometimes they don't even like realize that it's Ian Miles Chong. Like, they didn't even look at the profile picture or the name, or they have no idea who the fuck he is. But like, he's still popular because he does the East Asian thing and just steals everybody's shit without royalties or crediting the source.
No, he's not, Ian.
So, I am not, off the top of my head, I'm not like up to date on the Malaysian political structure. But does Malaysia even have a president?
They got a prime minister. Here's the thing: is you're not.
They have like a prime minister and a king or something.
You're not up to date on the Malaysian political structure, but neither is Ian Miles Chong. So it's
he's too busy focusing on America.
The only time he ever talked about Malaysia is when some people wrote some like editorials in Malaysian media calling him a Zionist because he, to his credit, rightly pointed out that Hezbollah and Hamas are the fucking bad guys over there, right? Well,
did he point that out, or did he just copy and paste it from somebody else?
I assume the latter.
Probably.
Okay.
And being a Zionist is bad in a majority Islamic country. So that's where the whole meme, the joke meme that he was going to be publicly executed came from. And that did not come to pass. He was not executed. And good for him. Yeah. So.
Oh.
But he's another one, and like he doesn't like actually.
Oh no,
I'm sure he believes the stuff he posts. He just has no like coherent philosophy to follow.
He came to notoriety for being like jumping on board the Gamergate bandwagon back in like 2014.
Right.
He was against it before he was for it, and it's whatever he thinks the Americans are talking about, he will inject himself into. I think he also gets paid. He writes for Russia Today sometimes. I think he gets paid to spread Russian agitprop too.
Almost guaranteed. There is a certain political, I don't want to say philosophy because it's not. and it's not even really a faction, but there's a political mindset that boils down to simply contrarianism. And that's part of how we've ended up in such a shit show that we're in right now.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, I wish I could find it, but there was I don't want to call it a meme. It was just, but it was a graphic that pointed out the difference in Russia Today's headlines in like America and Europe versus South America, right? So in America and Europe, it's like, oh man, these woke people, they're transing kids and all that stuff, and this is all terrible and all that. Whereas in South America, once you translate their headlines into English, it's just like they're celebrating it. They're being like, "Isn't this progressive that these people are being trans and all that stuff?" So Russia Today is it's a propaganda piece that is used by the Russian government to destabilize the West, which goes back to the active measures that Yuri Bezmenov brought up. Like,
that doesn't sound like something.
Guys, like you gotta look at this stuff, and just because Russia is against woke shit, or Russia Today is against woke shit in the U.S., that doesn't make them an ally. That just means that they're latching on to something that can create division and controversy and that stuff. Because elsewhere, they're not doing that. They're doing the exact opposite. So,
and there's also, and it's not just Russia Today. I noticed this years ago with Al Jazeera. You read the Al Jazeera English page, and it seems almost like the Wall Street Journal. So you get a lot of people. You get a lot of people talking about, Al Jazeera's got some of the best reporting out there, blah, 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 blah. Yep. Go over to the Arabic side and use Google Translate or whatever and read the headlines and the stories there, and it's markedly different because Al Jazeera is a Qatari-owned jihadi propagandist arm. So not only are you not necessarily getting the unbiased reporting you think, you're probably getting nudged every time you read some of Al Jazeera, because jihadists, like communists, talk out of both sides of their mouths, and the way you know they're lying is their lips are moving and words are coming out.
There was a couple of years ago, Al Jazeera, their internet presence, AJ Plus, was putting forward a supposedly conservative Twitter account called Rightly, and then they got called out pretty bad. I don't know if it actually went anywhere, but yeah, they try to do things like that. That's
right. Neither did CNN Plus, but that wasn't right.
A lot of people, like including the people we're talking about, will make a lot of noise about AIPAC, but the Qatari government, through Al Jazeera and a lot of their donations, are actively trying to influence the U.S. government.
See, John, here's the thing with that. The causes are not the causes. Disruption, demoralization, and destruction is the cause. Once that destruction is accomplished, they'll be back at each other's throats. I don't actually have it here in the room right now, but it's going.
Literally 5 minutes before Hamas attacked the music festival on October 7th, right? 5 minutes before, people were using anti-Semitism as a cudgel against anybody to the right. If you weren't woke on everything, you were immediately a Nazi and an anti-Semite. 5 minutes later, when all the videos of the mass, murder and genocide and rape and all that stuff was hitting the internet, people would be like, "Well, they deserved it because they're Jews," and it's like, really?
Yeah.
So it's not that they have an actual alliance just because of the common enemy. Most of these people don't actually hate Jews, anyways, but they're on the side that does.
They hate a simulacrum in their own heads.
The thing.
Yeah, but that even then, they know other Jewish Americans who really don't have any tie to Judaism other than the ethnic thing, and they'll be like, "Well, I don't hate you, but I hate Zionists," right? That's how they factor that, because they're going after the colonial thing, and like the oppressor versus oppressed, and Israel is, in their minds, they're an occupying force and a colonizer and all that stuff. And so that's the word that they latch onto, right? And so that's why they go that way. Don't bring up that, technically the Arabs have been colonizing and occupying everywhere that's not Saudi Arabia for, over 1,000 years.
That's
so
when
they'll say, that's too far back.
That's one of those things where you get into like the progressive omni cause, right? It's something about this thing about progressive politics, especially in the last 20 years, is that you have to be for everything. You can't say, well, okay, I'm really worried about climate change and I think we need to take action on that, but I don't really think that we should let men play in women's sports if they say they're women. Like, no, you can't do that. It's all or nothing.
Yeah, just ask J.K. Rowling. That's her.
Right?
Yeah.
It's all or nothing.
She is to the left of you on fucking everything. Yes, you watching this. She is to the left of you on fucking everything except for that one cause, and they hate her for it.
Yep.
People who grew up with Harry Potter as the only books they'd ever read, who wouldn't shut up about what Hogwarts house they remember. It's like David, you're 30, stop it. But
Bro, as far as I'm concerned, they're all Hufflepuff because that's the gayest sounding one.
And it's like even like the Harry Potter Wizarding World account on Twitter changed its name to just like Wizarding World or something, and they blocked me. I have never interacted with any part of the Harry Potter fandom. I
guarantee you dodged a bullet with that block.
Yeah, your letter's not coming in the mail or by owl anymore, Mike.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because in EOD we used to joke call the infantry guys muggles. So it's
there's also so some of this ties into, and yeah, I keep going back to this because and I've been going back to it for 4 years now. What I call the revolutionary mindset. It's not strictly speaking communist. It's not strictly speaking Islamist. It's not strictly speaking National Socialist or anything else. It is, again, usually affluent people, which most of the people we're talking about are relatively comfortable. They have done everything that they think they should have done. They're happy, but they're not because they're miserable human beings. And so therefore, they have to point the finger at something that must be society, and they get this idea that's whispered around that, well, if we just burn it all down, it's society is oppressing us, and that's why we're unhappy, so we have to burn it all down, and then utopia will come from the ashes. This goes back at least to Rousseau.
I do not think that Rousseau or the French, as much as I would love to blame this on the French, they didn't invent this. They just had one of the famous historical examples of it. This is a a certain segment of the population.
They're the ones that weaponized it to the effect that it has now. They gave it its current day identity. Because before, all right, what was the revolutionary mindset before that? It was like a peasant revolt and that shit. It's just like, we want to be treated better or differently or whatever. And then they fucking fight and then lose.
I think maybe it didn't really take off. There really wasn't much room for something like that to take off until the emergence of like the modern state.
You might be surprised.
Century.
You might be surprised. This book.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, Mike. I'm pretty sure Pete's read more about this than you have.
I haven't actually finished this book all the way because it's depressing as hell. But Shafarevich was a Russian mathematician. He was urged to write this book by the guy who wrote the foreword, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He actually traces some of this mindset at least back to the Gnostics in the Middle Ages. And the Albigensian Crusade was part of that. The same Albigensian Crusade that we regularly get told was just Christians massacring Christians because they weren't quite the right type of Christians, which is nothing like reality. Because, again, part of the demoralization is twisting or selectively editing history to get people to see the world through your particular lens.
My favorite example of this are those accounts on Twitter that will post a picture of like a castle or a cathedral or some medieval building. Why don't we build things like this anymore? Because the invention of artillery made castles obsolete? I mean, that's why? Is it? No, that's not. They don't want the answer. They want you to be depressed because
shit looks ugly now. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Shit looks ugly now. Cathedrals, fucking beautiful. So castles, maybe functionally obsolete, still look fucking beautiful.
It depends. Like, they're a lot of
depends on the castle.
Well, not all modern buildings are ugly. Some of them are actually kind of cool and futuristic looking. We just don't. People don't tweet about how cool this building looks. They tweet about how ugly some brutalist museum or some postmodernist architecture type thing is.
And brutalism and postmodernist architecture is ugly as sin. I think we can mostly agree on that.
Brutalism isn't even like modern per se, and that came from what, the Soviet Union or German?
Yeah, it was Soviet.
So it's more than a century old, which is a long time in architecture phenomenon.
But
so you're talking about how it's mostly affluent people. Check this out. So this is protest versus how much the college that the protest is going on costs. Green, if you'll see there, is where there's an encampment. So like an actual solid, occupation of protesters and that stuff. Red, there's a protest and no encampment. And then blue, there's just no fucking protests. What do you see here? Yeah.
Yep.
So
bored affluent people just want to burn it all down.
Yeah. So the further you go over on like the percent of Pell grants and all that stuff, that's more like you need this financial aid because you can't afford it, but you got a scholarship because like you're going into a career field that is fucking it's STEM. It's fucking like useful shit, right? Versus the left side of the axis where it's just way more expensive and mommy and daddy are paying for it.
And that's where
this is what you're talking about, Pete, where it's just overly affluent motherfuckers.
Let me see if I can find it. I saw, honest to God, it was a 4chan green text that is very relevant. Let me see if
I trust it immediately now.
Well, people wouldn't just go on the internet and tell lies.
So there's you've got the thing that has really started to bother me lately is that you have the same phenomenon on both sides of the political spectrum. You have the rabid leftists, the communists, the tankies, whatever you want to call them. But then you're seeing more and more on the so-called right that is basically saying that everything is the oligarchy, everything is the deep state, and our entire history is a lie. Everything the United States has done since 1865, or who knows, I'm sure some of them think since Alexander Hamilton, has been evil and wrong, and it just all needs to get burned down.
Well, I mean, I've been very vocal about this. I've been very vocal about my hypothesis as to why this is, but go ahead.
Some of this takes the shape of, I don't want to say neo-Confederate because that's kind of a loaded term, but it's a very isolationist sort of. Help me out here, Coop. I think you know what I'm talking about.
There's.
Oh well, it's anything that weakens America needs to be pursued. which is why like isolationism is a part of it. Everybody thinks isolationism is just like minding your own business and all that shit. No, what it is giving, like, making sure that your enemy has every opportunity and all the time in the world to set up an attack against you and hit you with the most effectiveness possible before you do anything to mitigate that risk. That's isolationism. We have never been isolationist before the first punch
surrendering
been
most
thrown.
of the world to the bad guys.
Yeah, and the U.S. has never actually been isolationist. We have, well, I was going to say we've known our limits, but War of 1812 kind of like disproves that. But we've been cognizant to not go out and just start causing problems with other people's shit or getting roped up in stuff that like doesn't benefit us at all. We have never been isolationist because for the longest fucking time, especially from when we first started as a country, everything was reliant on global trade for us. That's why in the Constitution, you have the articles against a standing army, but not a standing navy. We always wanted a navy that would protect all of our global assets and overseas trade and, the naval shipping routes and all that stuff. We wanted that secured.
Thomas Jefferson took this country to war against pirates.
Yeah.
So.
But we've never been isolationist. Okay. The Monroe Doctrine is not isolationist. Okay. It said, hey, everybody across the Prime Meridian, you stay on your fucking side, and we're going to deal with all this shit like down here in our neighborhood. Not our house, our neighborhood. South America was ours to deal with.
What was interesting about that, too, is that when we made that declaration, the British backed us because they didn't want their rival European powers getting a foot in the New World, more. Most of them had been driven out.
I was going to say kind of late for that, but yeah.
Well, the Spanish and the Portuguese had largely been driven out of the Western Hemisphere by then.
They didn't want Germany getting a foothold, which is why you have like the Verasca. Is it the Verasca incident or the Versasca incident? I don't know. I'm getting it wrong. But there was like a naval bullshit thing with Germany down in like Venezuela or something like that back in the 1830s or something like that. No, it would have been later than that. And post Civil War, whatever.
The British didn't do that for altruistic reasons. They did it because they didn't want to have to worry about another front opening up against Germany or Russia or whatever rival. Because Europe was in pretty. Europe had been through a lot of war at that point.
Yeah, well, they did the fuck over the Germans, which as much as I hate the British, kind of respect them for that. Don't like the Germans either, and the Germans deserve it. So. Which got you want to talk about how like isolationism isn't ideal? Check out in the I want to say like the turn of the 1800s to the 1900s, like right before the Spanish Civil War, or even maybe like right after it. I don't know. It's been a while since I looked this up. France and Spain were fighting over Morocco and all that shit, and then Germany got involved, and they were all fighting over Morocco to the point where Morocco was just like, America, please make us your protectorate. So we could have owned Morocco instead of France, and we could have controlled the Straits of Gibraltar, but Teddy Roosevelt said no. So,
God damn it, Teddy!
I know he ruins everything.
What happened to the big stick, Teddy? What?
He had prior incidents with Morocco, so he. Yeah.
So part of this whole mindset problem again is simply not knowing history. Now there's a line out of it's. I'm getting somewhere with this.
Okay.
There's a line out of the Screw Tape letters where Uncle Screwtape tells Wormwood that people think that most of our work is the things we put into people's heads, but in fact, our best work is done in keeping things out. That is what the conspiracy theorist and the propagandist does most of the time, is keep things out, leave out details, and slowly shrink that bubble, that Plato's cave that people are living in, where they can't necessarily tell the shadows from the reality. Interestingly enough, there's going to be a reading list for this one.
We're assigning you homework, guys.
Yes, this book actually came out. This book actually came out in 2000.
To do it. This fucking lag, dude. I swear.
So it's not just me then. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's why me and Pete have been talking over each other for the past like 20 minutes, dude.
I just thought our timing was bad tonight. I don't know. I'm glad there's a technical explanation.
So this book came out in 2008. It is Shadow World, Resurgent Russia, the Global New Left, and Radical Islam. That long ago, this guy was putting together some of the dots before which one, Russia's really based, et cetera, et cetera. So the based champion of the right wing and traditional Christianity is also predominantly allied with Communist China, North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba. Do I need to go on and paint more of this picture?
Well, see, you're just buying the CIA's line about those countries and blah blah. It's like
I am so sick of everybody blaming the CIA for everything. Guys, they are not that smart. They are not that competent. You want to know how I know? Because they had no fucking idea that Russia was invading Ukraine. Okay, amongst other reasons that I'm not going to get into, but
amongst many other reasons.
Yeah.
Here's again the thing is we're coming back to the Plato's cave thing again, which actually Chandler uses in the intro to that book. Yeah. Is even these so-called conservative, right-wing, MAGA, whatever the hell you want to call them, people are trumpeting Soviet propaganda from forever ago, because for the Soviets, everything is the fault of American imperialism. Oh, we've got tanks rolling down your street and stomping on your neck. It's because of American imperialism and the CIA.
Yeah.
These people don't know how clandestine operations work. They don't know how influence operations work. They certainly don't know how coups actually work, let alone actually knowing how an intelligence agency works.
You want to know why Soviet propaganda has taken such a strong hold on this, whatever you want to call it, the new right, just as well as it has the left? And you want to know why both sides of the aisle are just as black-pilled on America and hate America and are completely unpatriotic and think that the only way forward for their side to succeed, not just one side, is for America to fall. It's because these guys have they all went to the same schools. I'm not talking about colleges either, although that's a big part. I'm talking about like the American public education system, the K through 12 shit. Everything they grew up watching on TV or reading in books or comic books or all that shit. Everything they saw in the movies, all the video games they played. They have the same upbringing. They have the same education as the people who are lockstep on the left. Okay? They've been getting propagandized against the more libertarian or the more traditional America and the values and virtues of the Constitution as the left has. So why would their methods be any fucking different than the commie agitators that have been captured by the left?
I mean, yeah,
both sides have been captured by the Soviet propaganda and the demoralization and the active measures that have brought them to this level. Because active measures didn't give a shit about just like suppressing the right and amplifying the left. They gave a shit about destabilizing everything from all sides and all angles.
It's like what is the this new wave of like pseudo white nationalists and gripers? That's people adopting critical race theory, where everything comes back to race.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, every other race is going to do this, and we get to do it too. Even though
And
sorry, kids, white people are never going to be a single cohesive group because white people is just a thing we made up. It doesn't have a common culture.
Because the Germans count as white people. It's like, yeah, and you can't get along with Germans. I'm sorry, they're
the groypers and the white nationalists, or even just everything you know about World War II is wrong. The most documented war in human history, folks.
I mean, has there anything in history that has been more researched and talked about than World War II? I mean, there are no big secret revelations left, guys.
The war on Christmas.
Bill
O'Reilly wakes up in a cold sweat.
I've
been summoned.
There's been this growing mythology again from leaving stuff out of history that, well, Hitler was just trying to stop communism. Is that why he set out to completely annihilate the Polish people?
Yeah, that's why he invaded France, because he was worried about the communist Russians.
No.
That's why he had alliance with Russia.
And that's why Stalin was so shocked that the alliance was broken that he didn't come out of his room for 3 days after he got word that Barbarossa had kicked off.
Because I know when here's the thing I was talking about. This is what I think a lot of this comes from is there's a certain subset of people who are bored, and whether they're affluent and they try to make a revolution happen, or they're just anons who wish a revolution would happen, they're bored. Because we have life easy, because we live in the most prosperous society in all of human history. That's not a problem. That is good. Our ancestors did not have it nearly so good. But it's boring because exciting things don't happen for most people. So they think a civil war will be just some event for them to tweet about, that it won't affect them, And that's stupid. That's very, very stupid. But
okay, Pete, can I take this?
Knock yourself out.
I can't see.
All right. So Pavlo John asks, how documented are the operations in OEF and OIF by comparison? You would think that with modern tech, we would know every last detail about those two wars. We do. Nobody cares because nobody wants to go through the details. They just want to remember the emotional vibe that they had when they made up their mind.
Well, Derp, we lost Iraq.
Which is what I'm getting to. Can fucking anybody explain to me by what metric did we lose Iraq?
And if the follow-up question is, if we lost the Iraq war, who won? Because it sure as fuck wasn't Saddam Hussein.
I was going to say it wasn't the Iraqis.
Well, there's the whole, and we're getting again to the gaslighting by leaving stuff out. What was the reason we went into Iraq? Anybody? It's always WMDs didn't actually exist. Yeah. So it's WMDs didn't actually exist. Well, first of all, we know they exist. Ask the people living in Halabja who can go to the memorial anytime they feel like it and see the photographic evidence of what he did to the Kurds with chemical weapons. Not to mention the convoy of trucks that left Iraq for Syria just before the invasion kicked off.
Obviously,
somehow was never mentioned again.
You remember all the chemical attacks that happened during the Syrian civil war, and we were just like, where did they get those from?
Well, I wonder.
It's funny because a lot of these same people were denying that those happened too.
But here's the other thing, and we're getting back to that memory hole. WMDs was only one of the reasons. You look at the laundry list of violations of the 91 ceasefire, the fact that we hadn't gone in and re-stomped him years prior. I mean, regime change in Iraq was a Clinton administration policy, one that the Bush administration wasn't that interested in at first.
People forget this, but I remember because 2000 was the first election I was old enough to vote in, right? During 1999 and 2000, George W. Bush was campaigning on not policing the world the way the Clinton administration had. We weren't going to be the global RoboCop anymore. We were going to focus on our problems at home and rebuild the military. Does any of this sound familiar? But
do you also remember, speaking of like the WMDs don't exist, does anybody remember, and this was fucking repeated on The Daily Show, Yeah, of course Iraq has WMDs because we have the receipts. Does anybody remember that?
Yeah.
That talking point?
They think that we gave the Iraq, like, mustard gas is not complicated. You don't need
No.
American support to make it. It's
Yeah, we gave we supplied some sort of munitions, chemical even, through Kuwait as a mediary. So during the Iraq-Iran war, right? And then
Now, who was arming Saddam right up until the crossing the line of departure in 03 too?
Yeah. So and
But
so,
mocking the French and renaming French fries freedom fries, that was just stupid. There was no reason for that.
I still call them freedom fries. I still call them freedom fries. Fuck the French. But no, it was yeah, it was way more complicated than that. And then everybody had contradictory talking points until the dust was settled, and then people kind of saw where, like, not the zeitgeist, but like the public level of awareness was. And then they latched on to the talking point that matched that one so that they would be more popular and, like, not get into a shouting match. It was the popular thought, right? And the popular thought wasn't the truth. It was the emotional trend at that time. And because everybody was watching fucking Daily Show and listening to their fucking retard lefty high school teachers and shit, like, that's where it settled. You know what I mean? And like this was also back when, like, which got Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and all them were, like, the biggest people on the internet, right? So it's like that was the zeitgeist at the time, or that's how the environment was, and so that's where it stayed once it was no longer a talking point. But that doesn't mean it was the truth.
And this was 20 years ago, so there was an entire generation of people who either weren't born yet or too young to remember it, but have opinions about it. I swear to God, there are Zoomers out there on the internet who think there was no opposition to the Iraq War, that it was just
okay.
Everyone just threw, like, yeah. It's, if anyone who was around at the time finds that hilarious, but that's kind of got memory hold.
What prompted the really heavy-duty opposition to the Iraq War? I'm leaving aside, like, Sean Penn going to try and glad hand with Saddam just beforehand.
I'm into Iraq.
It was John Kerry's campaign in 2004.
Yeah.
He was.
Speaking of propaganda,
before he was against it,
because they all did.
Yep.
Right, but they needed something. They needed something to oppose him on, and what's going to be more. All right, we see this now with, like, people on the right or nominal conservatives being like, "Oh, well, we need to back Russia because all the Democrats are just worried about Ukraine as, like, the slush fund for the Illuminati and all that shit." Like, which, I mean, is true. I don't think the Democrats actually give a fuck about Ukraine, but no, the Democrats were for Ukraine. The Democrats were in power when all that shit kicked off, which is kind of an indictment against them, but don't bring that up. So they were for Ukraine, right? Which means you need to oppose Ukraine. You need to be on Russia's side and all that shit. It's also tiresome, man. Like,
especially there is so much about how really. So Anatoly Golitsyn, anybody heard that name?
Yep.
Golitsyn was a KGB defector who basically said back in the 80s, perestroika is a lie. It's all bullshit. And yeah, things are falling apart, but the KGB knows it's falling apart. And they have a plan. Well, who is the president for life in Russia now? There is no such thing as an ex-Chekist, Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Who also, again, happens to be allied with every other communist and revolutionary country on the planet.
Yeah.
But, of course, we've got to side with the shadow communist against the admittedly corrupt as shit Ukrainians. I think let's let the Ukes cook and see, because if they'd taken Kiev 2 years ago, what would be the next move? Because if anybody actually believes that they'd stop there, I've got a nickname for you, and it's Chamberlain.
I mean,
I really like the talking point that Ukraine was asking for it because they were just, they were wearing a short skirt and right next to them with, a NATO patch on it and all that.
That's
shit.
what you get for.
So
that's what you get for being on the border with Russia. Like,
yeah, but I mean, like, so they're saying that Russia's not the aggressor in that situation because Ukraine.
Of the biolabs, you see. Here's the thing.
Doesn't this sound a little bit familiar, right? Which, I mean, I was told that Iraq was a legal war and we lost, but
the Ukrainian biolabs thing got started because in like 2002, the State Department did a program because they were worried about leftover chemical weapons in former Soviet states. And they set up this program to deal with that. And that got translated in 2022 to biolabs, which is a very vague term, right? I mean, technically my wife works in a biolab. What does that mean?
So you're compromised.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But the implication was that the Ukrainians were making biological weapons and threatening to use them on Russia or something, and that's why the Russians invaded. So apparently, if you're Russia, suspected weapons of mass destruction are, in fact, a perfectly valid reason to invade a country.
Meanwhile, had Ukraine actually committed any actual genuine acts of military aggression against Russia prior to a bunch of Russians trying to take Ukrainian territory in 2014 versus in Iraq, and it attempted to forcibly annex Kuwait, murdered a whole bunch of people in process, got kicked out, ceasefire with certain terms that were consistently violated over the course of 12 years. Not to mention, he didn't have anything to do with Al-Qaeda, except for all the meetings between Al-Qaeda and Iraqi Mukhabarat operatives, specifically looking for advice on poisons.
He also tried to assassinate the president.
Yeah. But see, because there was a familial connection between George W. Bush and George Herbert Walker Bush that Saddam tried to assassinate. Therefore,
wait, they're related?
It was just GW throwing a temper tantrum. And we shouldn't possibly have actually done anything about an attempted assassination just because it was a Bush.
Well,
I've actually heard that line of reasoning.
Well, yeah. Funny. Turns out people who may have been saying things like that 6 months ago were suddenly talking about how we just barely avoided a civil war on the attempted assassination of Trump. So I guess assassination really is a big deal if it's a politician you like. So.
Yeah, I guess what we're getting down to, and it's like it goes back to what you brought up, Mike, with I forget what you brought up. Never mind. But it goes back to it's the friend enemy distinction, and it's that these guys learned they were subject to the same propaganda for their entire lives as everybody on the left, right? Like they institutionally captured everything that brings a child up into an adult except the parents, and that's hit or miss, right? They might have, but it wasn't institutional. So these guys are coming from the same starting points and the same premises. The only change is where they end up on that side of the argument. There's no difference in methodology. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, here's what you brought up, Mike, when they were just like, okay, all this critical race theory, I'm going to use it for my benefit now. Okay, it's all going to be like, we need to unite the white race or whatever the fuck. It's because they grew up thinking like, okay, yeah, no, critical race theory is real. Like fucking, you'll meet so many of these kids. They weren't raised as racist, right? They grew up thinking it's like, oh yeah, no, black people are oppressed and all that shit. At some point, they hit a point where they were just like, I am tired of being fucking blamed for everything. So if you're allowed to be a racial supremacist and look at everything through race and try and only benefit your race, then I am too, and I'm going to do that because it involves me not losing. Right? That's their idea. I don't actually think this shit, guys. Don't.
One imagines like some like super progressive professor teaching about critical race about we need to analyze everything through the lens of race, and then the gripers happen. Like, no, not like that.
Yeah. But so which way? What are the major differences between each side now? That now that they've all come up through the same pipeline, as it were, and there's ended up on two different sides of the aisle. What is the thing that separates them? Well, nowadays, not that much. The only thing that separates them is the friend-enemy distinction, which is why you'll see it all the time. It's like the big right-wing talking points and the big left-wing talking points fucking switch every 4 years because it's just about being opposed to whatever your opponent is for. This is why we don't have nuclear reactors, by the way, or integral fast reactors and breeder reactors and shit like that, is because at a certain point, the technology got great for integral fast reactors and breeder reactors and all that stuff, and the Republicans were like a minority in Congress, and they brought it forth, and they were just like, "Hey, this is cool shit. We should do it." And the Democrats were like, "No, because you're for it." So that's why we don't have it.
And you see this in like a lot of there's been a lot written about the new right, like the Trump era right wingers who came up, and a lot of them, like Pedro Gonzalez, who you mentioned before, just disaffected Bernie bros, right? But people who before would call you a rhino or a neocon, or what was it like to say? Oh well, until Trump, right? Republicans were just Democrats driving the speed limit. Well, last couple of weeks now, it's those same people like, well, we actually need to moderate on abortion, and oh, by the way, here's RFK Jr. on the transition.
IFB needs to be free.
Help tackle the issue of chemtrails and subsidizing organic food.
Yeah, and repeating a Soviet-born conspiracy theory about the assassination of his uncle.
Yeah, here's the thing, though. I think RFK Jr. is actually dumb enough to fully believe it. I don't think he's just saying it.
The brain worm is in full effect.
That's not a bit. That's just the Kennedy brain worms, right. Literal in his case. But
because what makes John F. Kennedy look better, right? If he absolutely fucked up with the Bay of Pigs and was in danger of losing the election and needed to go down to Texas to campaign very hard before his reelection, or else he could lose and he'd be a one-term president. And that was just the situation that gave a fucking radical commie that even the Soviets were like, hey, you're a bit too much for us, a chance to assassinate him.
And
he was the greatest president that ever lived, and he was going to destroy the deep state and the military industrial complex before it even got off the ground, and he was going to stop the Fed and all that shit. And the Illuminati just couldn't take it, so they had to get the CIA in there to fucking assassinate him and all that shit. And then you got fucking LBJ after that.
Imagine in the year of our Lord 2024 believing young boomer agitprop about Kennedy's Camelot uncritically. They're accepting that, right? The press was long before the press was in. You think the press is in bed with the Democrats now? They were absolutely in bed with the Kennedys. Nothing bad came
literally
out of right? Yeah, in some cases,
literally. Thank God they weren't in his brother's car, though.
Yeah.
Kennedy. Here's the idea that JFK was the bane of the CIA, right? The CIA approached him with the concept for Operation Northwoods, right? This was where they had this idea that they were going to actually plan, stage either fake false flag attacks or real ones against Americans to try to whip up support for an invasion of Cuba. I don't know how, if this was ever something they just as a talking point or or if it was a conceptual, or if there was somebody in the CIA who was like, no, let's fucking go kill some Americans so we can go to war in Cuba, right? But Kennedy was like, no, we shouldn't do that. To his credit, what he didn't do is like, you guys are psychopaths, you're all fired. Which he had the authority to do because he was a fucking president, right?
Not to mention,
Put that on the back burner, just not right now. It's too early.
One of the other versions is floating around is, oh, he was going to get us out of Vietnam, and
He's the one who got us
in Vietnam.
He was, first of all, there's zero documentation to support that assertion. None.
Wasn't Operation Phoenix his thing though? Like he's the one that got us involved.
Pablo, there's that's a whole nother story. Kennedy was actually he was out of the loop on most of that. You can lay the most of that shit show on the New York Times and the State Department.
Weird.
Always the fucking New York Times.
Weird how some things never change, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The State Department conducted foreign policy on their own. What?
But if you really want to get into a deep dive on that one, Triumph Forsaken, Mark Moyer. He goes into all of the details.
Does he go into, like, technically speaking, we won Vietnam?
Pretty much, yes. That's in the second Triumph Regained.
Okay. That's not me just being, like, a wisecracker or anything like that.
No, we lost him.
I'm still here. Oh, wait, he's not here. Okay. He's just frozen in it. Damn that handsome bastard. Look at that profile.
What's funny is he can probably hear us.
I know.
That's can't hear him.
That's why it's really funny, right?
No.
But I can encapsulate a little bit the. He just texted and said he's blue screened, like his computer bricked.
Yeah.
So he might be back, guys.
He might be back.
You can track some of this, the example of the demoralization and the going crazy, because they kind of go hand in hand with the fall of Elijah Schaffer. Remember Elijah Schaffer? He was on the Blaze for a while, right? Well, he got fired from the Blaze for sexually harassing somebody, and he was married. They fired him. Surprisingly, they have standards, right? And after that, this man went into a spiral, right? And I'm going to show you some of the. This is where Elijah ended up. He got fired from one job, and it was maybe the Nazis got a raw deal in history, right? Or let me see, where is it? Yeah, right. Or communism is actually based,
People are like one organism. Yeah, that's really something to strive for.
Or just asking questions about the Jews, right? And then finally, you know where the bottom of this pit is, right? The earth is flat. Because there's like this emotional spiral where once you believe one stupid thing, you then end up believing all the stupid things. It's like the inverse of the progressive omni-cause.
That also kind of ties into the whole contrarianism thing, because yes, there are some deeply corrupt, deeply dishonest, just absolutely disgusting people in government. Much of it is bloated and dysfunctional, and yes, the government has lied consistently about a whole lot of things. However, what that leads to, and this is another reason to have actual integrity. You could say integrity is a matter of national security, because then you have people who realize that they've been lied to about this thing. Rather than actually look into stuff, they then just assume that they've been lied to about everything. which naturally means even worse people can come and lie to them, and they'll believe it. They'll just eat it up.
A very poignant recent example of this was what some of the public health apparatus did in response to COVID. Right? COVID was a real thing. It wasn't something they just made up. It wasn't a scamdemic or a plandemic. It really happened, right? But they flipped from "I'll never get that Trump vaccine" to "if you don't get that vaccine, you should be fired and not allowed to leave your house." They destroyed 50 years of hard-won vaccine acceptance in this country. When Elvis Presley got enlisted and was drafted into the Army, he agreed to have pictures of him getting his inoculations to try to help people convince the American public, which was skeptical of even the most basic childhood vaccines back then. Like, no, these are okay, right? But because they pushed the COVID vaccine so hard, and they didn't want to talk about whatever side effects there may have been, and they didn't want to talk about this, and they didn't want to talk about that, and they pushed it on people who probably didn't need it because they weren't at really a risk of getting COVID or dying from it in the first place. It didn't affect everybody equally. Now people like RFK Jr., who were saying vaccines cause autism 20 years ago, are being taken seriously. This was something like the kooks in Hollywood used to be about, like Jenny McCarthy and that whole crowd. Right. And now it's, oh, well, you're based if you don't get vaccines now. But except, you still got to vote for the guy who championed Operation Warp Speed, because you shut up.
Yeah.
But, so it takes, you can destroy an institutional credibility in a year that takes half a century to restore. And they did that during COVID. And it's a damn tragedy. People are going to die because of that. People are going to die unnecessarily because there will be a disease or an outbreak or something, and they won't listen to any guidance or any reasonable, even personal precautions about it, because they'll think it's all bullshit. Good job, guys. I hope Dr. Fauci is fucking proud of himself, which I'm actually sure he is.
Oh, he's incapable of not being proud of himself.
Who was that?
But Fauci.
Dr. Fauci.
I thought you were talking about me.
Oh, wow.
Well, if the shoe fits. So
yeah. Sorry, everybody. My computer died, and I had to go through all my fucking browser settings on my phone to allow like camera and phone microphone access before I could rejoin.
So yes, the Coop is joining us live from on the scene in Cairo. Coop, how are things in Cairo?
They're shit. There's too many Egyptians.
Has the Africa Corps caught you yet?
No. I'm not going to say why they haven't, but it's very un-PC. But I can still run for Prime Minister of Canada.
Is it? I was about to say, it's because you're Italian and they think you're on their side.
No, it's blackface.
But like, the problem is, and I've talked about I've talked some about the what the conspiracy theorist does best is leave things out. But there's another side to it, which is what I call the Gnostic temptation. The Gnostics being all about secret knowledge that only the initiated have. Well, everybody wants to have this pride in knowing the secret knowledge. And that's what a lot of these propagandists are taking advantage of. And that also makes it much harder to counteract it, because now you have somebody whose personal pride is tied up in the fact that they know all these things that are complete garbage, made up out of whole cloth, but it makes them the insider. So you have It's not 100%, but it's a good chance. If somebody tells you that they see through all the propaganda, they're probably one of the most propagandized people you ever met.
Yeah.
Literally fucking nobody, even trained counter intel people and like propagandists themselves, sees through every bit of propaganda. That's why it's propaganda.
It's also
Like, it wouldn't be effective if people were immune.
These guys will, on one hand, call everything propaganda. On the other hand, they will unquestionably accept foreign propaganda. They just assume that it's true, right? Like, well, dude, Hollywood, like the Top Gun is just propaganda. Like,
G.I. Joe is just propaganda.
I guess Top Gun was propaganda in that the Navy sponsored the movie so they could use it for recruiting. Like, what did you think? They just bought those F-14s for the movie? Like, yeah, is that
joke's on them? I know people that joined the Air Force because of Top Gun, so it couldn't have been that.
Yeah, the Air Force didn't get. We got Iron Eagle instead. It was the Air Force.
It was okay.
The Air Force did not like to play ball with the media until the 2000s, when suddenly the C-17 was transporting Optimus Prime and Iron Man. But that was also propaganda, like militant propaganda. Or this is one that people is when they say that the Halo Reach trailer was propaganda, or the Halo.
My favorite trailer. My favorite part is that after Independence Day, like the Air Force got a huge bump in recruitment because nobody realized, nobody followed that plot line that all the pilots were like Marine Corps. Because at that point, this was before, Black Hawk Down and Modern Warfare and Battlefield and all that shit. Like, people didn't really know what the military was like, so they were just like, nobody even knew the Marine Corps had planes.
To be fair, most people's conception of the Marine Corps is the guy all cammyed up, sneaking through the jungle, like killing people. They don't realize the Marines also have like cooks and mechanics and admin personnel too.
Well, that's because the Marine Corps does it to themselves, because like every Marine Corps is a rifleman, which I've been on record saying no. Every Marine knows how to fire a rifle, but like there's a lot that goes into being a rifleman.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a neat idea, but how many training hours are you going to take your guys who turn wrenches for a living and make them do infantry stuff? It's like, is this really?
Well,
there isn't time.
Yeah, they got their own shit to do. So
it's because all right, so every Marine goes through Marine combat training, which is a very abbreviated version of School of Infantry. And even infantry Marines will be like, yeah, once you go through ITB or Infantry Training Battalion, the School of Infantry and all that shit, like, you're technically a grunt, but you're a shitty grunt. Like, you need to be re-taught once you get to the fleet and all that stuff. So that'd be like me, an 0311 grunt, going through a fucking week-long comms class and then saying I'm a fucking radio operator. Like, I'm a trained, billeted radio technician.
I got me a mouse.
Yeah, there's a difference there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, I will tell a little personal story about how it comes back to our actual topic, right? I started lurking on Twitter in 2020 around the election. And there were some accounts that I followed, like, these guys seem cool. Turns out those guys weren't cool, right? But as I continued on for the next couple of years, I started noticing some trends. Like, I was noticing, in triple parentheses, right, that certain people that big followings were saying some pretty wild shit if you stopped and thought about it, right? And once you got past the haze, the emotional roller coaster of the 2020 election, because if you're into politics, that was a roller coaster. Because we didn't know who was going to be president for 3 months, right? That was insane. But once you got past that, you started to look at some of this stuff and wait a minute, right? Why are these guys with these huge followings tweeting about national divorce? They're talking about breaking up the United States. What scenario in what situation does that happen where it doesn't make literally everybody's life worse, right?
Not to mention, there was this assumption that somehow it would just be between Americans. There's no civil war in the history of the world that has just involved the people in that particular country.
I mean, how
I
would
mean-
you,
Particularly not in this day and age.
would you want to roll the dice on, let's say there's an actual dispute over has command authority over the United States nuclear arsenal. For a while, nobody's in charge. Nobody has launch authority. Do you want to take the chance? Because I think there's a non-zero chance that the Russians would just nuke the shit out of us when they have the opportunity.
That reminds me, Mike, the Air Force did have Broken Arrow.
That's true. That's true. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a shame they
I forgot that movie existed. Damn it.
Anyways, but speaking of like other countries getting involved, like everybody's gonna jump to like China and Russia, which are not good options. But you think that the southern border is porous now?
Shit.
Try that with a fucking civil war between between states and that shit.
Wait till the
And,
Canadians
what,
claim
and,
Mackinac Island.
and that's the other thing. It wouldn't even be between states. It'd be Beirut writ large.
Yeah, but again, we go back to the green text Pepe kid, right? Like, he's just bored. He wants something exciting to happen in his life, but he's too fat or too chicken shit to join the military. So nothing exciting will happen because you live in a safe, relatively prosperous society. I'm sorry.
All this,
I bet your ancestors are just weeping big purple panther piss tears for you, you know?
this reminds me of something that is barely related to this at all, but it's in my mind. So you remember that remember that Civil War movie that came out like a year or two ago?
Oh, yeah, I still need to watch that. It's like it's on.
No, you don't. It sucks.
No,
But,
I know it sucks. That's why I want to see it.
Okay, so here's the thing. You know the fucking moment in the trailer that everybody latched onto, the "What kind of American are you?" Scene, right? Well, in the actual fucking movie, it's just racism. Like it's not as cool as we thought it was, because in the trailer, it's hitting on the theme of Civil War. Okay, what kind of American are you? What makes you an American? Are you the Americans that are on that side of the conflict? Are you Americans on this side of the conflict? What gives you the identity of American when two separate factions of Americans are fighting each other, right? That is interesting. And that's what the trailer and how it presented that line and that scene showed it, right? No, in the movie, he's just like, well, you look kind of brown, or what kind of American are you? Are you South American? Are you Central American? And then, like, if anybody says anything that's not like a U.S. state, like there's a guy from Hong Kong and he says Hong Kong instead of lying like a fucking normal person would, he gets shot, right? Like, so the actual scene in the movie is fucking dumb.
Dagamore, that actually makes it a bad movie.
No, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it because I think it's going to be a good movie. I want to see it because it's fucking A24, and you know it'd be the most pretentious thing ever. Like, there's no way this was going to be a good movie.
Of course it's pretentious. The protagonists are journalists, dude. Like,
I mean, number one, right?
Hollywood playing journalists. There's
they kind of chickened out because they did what I thought they did in the trailer. People were like, "What do you mean California and Texas are on the same side?" Well, what they did is they didn't explain the scenario that caused the war, and they wanted it to just be completely batshit and not make sense to us, so you wouldn't. They wanted people to focus on the story and on how war is bad, not on rooting for a faction. So they didn't really explain like what the conflict was actually about. But that was also kind of chicken shit, because you're like, this is a really hot button issue and people are talking about this, and then you just make it generic, like no sides, like you don't explain what anybody's for.
The whole approach to it is chicken shit. Okay, you want to know what? You remember that old show Jericho? That show did it better than this.
I like that show. I thought that was a decent. It got a little weird towards the end there, but So there is a certain. I mean, going back to 2020, 2022, It wasn't just national. These are just like some big people on Twitter. Jesse Kelly, Dave Riaboy, right? These are like people with tens or hundreds of thousands of followers. National divorce. And then they're like, oh, well, we need a dictator. Jesse Kelly just tweeted that one time, and he later deleted it. And Dave Riaboy went on a panel with like 5 other dudes, like Martyr Maid and the guy who wrote the Flight 93 election article about how America needs a Caesar. I mean, America doesn't need a Caesar. It wouldn't fucking work the way you're imagining it. What is wrong with you?
Well, here's the thing: is you never just get one Caesar. You get a succession of like 12 Caesars because they all fucking assassinate the guy that came before them.
Yeah, like how does that work out for Rome in the long term? I mean, now they're Italians. No offense, Coop.
Yeah, and then all the good Italians are Americans. So it's
we're Italy now. Chef Boyardee.
Anybody bringing up Di Bello Gallico as an example to try and emulate? First of all, I've never read it and has never read any actual Roman history, so they don't know what the hell they're talking about. But that seems to go along the louder and more attention they get, the less they actually know what they're talking about. Kind of like that Dan Brown review that you guys found this afternoon.
That is my favorite review now.
It's not just that. Like when they make these comparisons of the United States to Rome, like we're like late Empire Rome. No, we're not. There's
not even close.
If you zoom way out and squint and don't know anything about the history, I don't know anything about the history of Rome. I've forgotten most of what I learned in school. I don't think about Rome every day. I'm not interested in it, right? Whatever. But I know that what happened in Rome 2,000 years ago is not a direct analog for what's happening here and now, right? Nor is it an analog Weimar Germany. Things were 1,000 times worse in Weimar Germany than they are even in the worst place in the U.S.
Yeah, for example, they were Germans.
There is a saying that history never repeats itself, though it does rhyme. A lot of people need to remember that saying because there is no direct analog any time in history. Not in 5,000 years have you seen a direct analog for any other particular situation in any new situation. Because that's not the way this works. It's not a computer program.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but like history is a really hard worm to rhyme with. Like, name one.
Mystery.
There you go. Okay. All right, we're good. History rhymes, but it's always a mystery. I'm so glad the camera's not off.
Now, somebody in the comments saying Pablo John is dictator might have been Lincoln. Some people like to say that, but I mean, he did overexert his authority as the executive, but like, was he a dictator? He ran for re-election. I mean,
he was re-elected.
Yeah, I mean, even FDR was president for life, literally, but he was extremely popular. He got reelected because the country loved him, because the country was stupid, right? But they still loved him. Does that make him?
Wilson did far worse things than either Lincoln or FDR.
And
yeah, the thing with FDR though is that like the damage he caused and like all the problems like weren't really assessed until like way after he was fucking dead. So at the time, people just saw him as the guy that got him out of the Great Depression and led them through World War II. Like that's all they fucking know about him. So that's why like you'll have your old, fucking World War II veteran granddad or great granddad that's, still an FDR fan, even though he's on the right for every other fucking thing down the list.
Guys who were fighting in overseas during the war cried when they got the news that FDR died. There was an emotional attachment to the man, and that doesn't mean he was a great president or had good policies. He didn't have good policies. He put 110,000 Americans in fucking concentration camps. That's not a good thing. But
yeah,
you can forget it when there's an existential war.
So the other part of that is to address the issue you were bringing up with like the guys who are calling for an American Caesar or a dictator and all that shit. So there's been like studies on who actually is a populist and who like identifies with populist, political stuff, right? And we're not talking about the candidates, we're talking about the voters, like who would vote it for a populist leader and who considers themselves populists. And they're people that frankly just want to like go about their life. Like they have strong opinions about politics and all that shit and policy, but they don't want to do it. Like they don't want to be the guy in charge to run shit, because that's not the life they want. They don't want that authority. They don't want that lifestyle. They don't want all that headache and that shit. But they do want somebody who will implement all of their fucking stuff for them. So that's why you have populists who are like, okay, what if we just had a Caesar or some shit? Whereas on the other side of that stuff is the people who do want that power for themselves, who do want that authority, and who do want to implement their own stuff and be the managers of mankind, as it were. And so those people are the anti-populist or the left and all that stuff. So you don't really have good outcomes on either, which is why what Pete, Mike, and I always bring up is like the eternal vigilance and like sacrificing your time and mental state and making the sacrifices to make sure that you can be left alone by asserting your political authority and stuff like that and getting involved in things like that. So,
and if anybody
this is
tries
also why
to,
this is also why like libertarianism and isolism just don't work. It's because once you just want to be left alone, you're going to be overrun by the people who do.
and if anybody tries to tell you that, you still think voting works? I don't vote in this shit show because it's all rigged. Yeah, they're not your friend, and they are actively trying to contribute to the downfall of everything.
Half the people, okay, online, like big Trump fans, like, okay, look, you can't turn around, you can't scream on one hand like voting doesn't matter, it's all rigged, they're going to steal the election again, and then get pissed at people for saying they're not going to vote for Trump. Like it either matters or it doesn't, logically. So pick one, guys, please. Right? Obviously, voting matters. Elections have consequences. That's why everyone freaks out about them. That's why we have 3 Flight 93 elections in a row. Right? Does that mean
are they going to cheat? Sure, make it harder for them.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be the end of the world if your guy loses? Was it the last time he lost? Or the time before that? It doesn't mean bad things don't happen, right? It doesn't mean there won't be problems that could take years to correct. That's obviously true. But this thing is, if we lose now, it's communism. Like, no, not really.
There are still checks and balances in place, and we've seen that over the last 4 years.
You really have. Because, all this thing you're saying about, like, well, Kamala Harris will pack the Supreme Court. They said Biden was going to pack the Supreme Court. But our system was designed to prevent things like that from being easy, and they're hard. As much as people think of the president as like an elected king, he's not, and his power is actually kind of limited. Even though his
and
power...
getting more limited thanks to the Supreme Court, as a matter of fact.
Yes, and that's good. So don't give up on this. This country has been through some real bad times, guys. We think we have it bad now, but we went through a civil war that killed 600,000 Americans. And the consequences of that war divided this country for more than 100 years afterward, right? We went through a Great Depression where people were literally starving. This country used to be a lot poorer. Like before World War II, there are people still living in like sod houses.
Yep.
And
there were parts of this state that didn't get electricity until after 1945.
I mean, there was
when they legalized electricity.
There was an attempt. There was a plot to overthrow FDR and replace him with a fascist dictator. It didn't really go anywhere, but they tried to recruit. Was that Chesty Puller they tried to recruit for that, or was it?
No, that was it wasn't FDR. because it was
Smedley Butler?
Butler.
Yes. Yeah, so it was before that, but still, I mean, a lot of crazy shit has happened. The 19th century is just coated in blood, right? From one end to the other. From war, like the Civil War, the Indian Wars, land wars, range wars. You know, our history.
Sky Wars.
Our history is ugly and it's violent, and times were hard. And they're a lot better now, whether you want to admit it or not. Does it mean everything is better? No, but on the balance, yeah, you got things pretty good. If you're an American, you are like one of the luckiest people to have ever lived. So fucking chill out a little bit. Don't give yourself an anxiety attack over an election. It doesn't help.
And some of that has to do.
The problem is.
Go ahead, Coop.
Sorry. So the problem with that is that everybody's going through the same shit that like teenage girls do on social media. All right, when they compare themselves to the fucking Brazilian supermodel with like 50 million subscribers and that shit because she's a Brazilian supermodel and she hit the genetic lottery and she's halfway across the fucking world and has nothing to do with her. She's worried about competing with that, right? It's the same shit with social media, just on a political level instead of like a fucking self-esteem level and that stuff. So nowadays, everybody's worried about what shit is going on everywhere all at once. And it all feels way too big to fucking handle and too big to affect anything and all that shit. Whereas before the internet and before social media and all that stuff, you're kind of like really only worried about your fucking like local community, maybe the nearest city over, and your county and state. And then when shit got really big, it was on every fucking news and like, hey, you're getting drafted to go to Vietnam and that stuff. That's when you start worrying about like global events. All right. Guys got drafted for Korea, and when they came back, nobody had even known that they were gone. And like people were like, hey man, where you been? I thought you like died or fucking got drunk and disappeared. And he's like, no man, I was fighting in Korea. And they're like, where the fuck is Korea? Okay? Like shit's changed to the point where you're getting sensory overload with everything happening all at once, because that's what makes those platforms that give you that information money. That's their business model.
Not only
your
that,
world itself hasn't actually changed.
No, because guess what?
Look, as much as I like as much as like, I kind of like Elon Musk. I'm a big fan of SpaceX. I like rocket ships, right? But the man monetized the absolute worst part of Twitter. And it's getting worse. It's getting so much worse. The doom posting and the engagement bait, because that's how you make your money now. Now, I think Elon thinks this is funny because human interaction amuses and baffles him. But it's really kind of, Twitter was already kind of a blight on the political discourse. And I don't know if he made it worse, but he certainly didn't make it better.
And again,
well, he made it better in certain ways.
Unfortunately, it's not just limited to Twitter, because again, I've run into this stuff in the real world too.
Yeah.
And the genie is out of the bottle, as it were. What we've got to do is banish the genie. And the question, of course, is how do we go about doing that? Well, this is one step of doing that. We talk to people and we kind of we do what we can to set the record straight when we can. Sometimes it gets complicated because a lot of this comes down to historical perspective. I've been actually told that the history is just as curated as the news. It's all fake and gay. It's like, that's not how history works. It's not just, history is not just whatever history book got put into the colleges or whatever articles are getting posted online. And one of the best ways to, I think, and I've experienced some of this myself, is don't just read what your own side is saying. Read what the other side is saying when they don't think you can hear. An example would be, we have documents that were smuggled out of the Soviet Union around the end of, around in the early 90s. that tell us what the KGB was doing. Tell us what some of these influence operations were and where they started. We have the Venona intercepts, which should be eye-opening, and every American should at least read the Venona secrets about it, because a lot of what, again, those captured schools that Coop was talking about, a lot of what they taught us about the Red Scare and McCarthyism was bullshit. And we have the documentation to show that it was bullshit. Unlike, and this isn't just a matter of everything your teacher taught you was wrong. No, it's like this right here. These are the intercepts. This is what the Soviets were saying when they didn't think the Americans could hear. That shows that this particular narrative is wrong. That yes, these people actually were Soviet agents. Harry Hopkins, FDR's right-hand man, was a paid Soviet agent. That's just one example.
Yeah, and Lee Harvey Oswald was a jackass. That they were just like, we'll give you like $700 to go do something, but we're not too worried about it. We'll call you if we need you. And then they never called him. And then when he assassinated JFK, they were just like, oh, people think the CIA did it? Sure, let's push that.
Actually, they started as it didn't even start as a CIA conspiracy. They started it like nobody even remembers the name of the anti-communist industrialists they were initially targeting with that particular political warfare campaign. I can't even remember it off the top of my head. I'd have to go back into the Sword and Shield. Yeah. But there are notes of, okay, did we get Oswald's handwriting in this forged letter to this guy right?
Here's an example of from my collection. There's an example of the what we've been talking about here, right? See, so we're talking about how successful National Socialism was about.
Really successful. That's why Germany ended up in two pieces for 70 years.
Yeah, my response to this was the picture of the Soviet flag being flown over the Reichstag. They really stopped the communists.
Yeah. Well, let's stop the communists by making a deal with them, splitting an independent country, murdering as many of that country's citizens as possible. And there's an account of German troops, not even the SS, though the SS got involved later, massacring a bunch of Boy Scouts, just lining them up against the wall and shooting them in Poland in 1939.
And then
that's combating communism.
For people who keep talking about they want to embrace this European idea of left versus right, where it's this notion that it's the Nazis on the right and the communists on the left. Like a lot of former Nazis became East German state or apparatchiks after that because they had the know-how, they had the means, they were there. They switched sides to survive. The friend-enemy distinction people keep talking about, that comes from Carl Schmitt, who himself was a goddamn Nazi. He's also German.
Katyn Forrest was the Soviets, Dagmar, not the Germans.
One more Kraut philosopher spewing pompous nonsense that people are taking and trying to apply to their time and place when, his idea of the friend-enemy distinction is that, if you're my friend, everything for you. If you're not, you're my enemy, you get nothing, and I fight you at every turn. Like, congratulations, you have the same moral outlook as a Rwandan machete enthusiast. Except he doesn't need some fucking pompous Kraut to rationalize it for him. He can just be honest with himself.
So you want to know why everybody's gone towards the European mindset of right versus left?
Go ahead.
So, which gut? It's because it goes back to what I was saying, where it's like everybody was kind of brought up through the same pipeline. They all share the same premises and the preconceptions. And so, especially with like the whole rhino thing, and what are either side of the aisle offering. They're offering kind of just like managed economies and like closer and closer to what, a communist or national socialist control by the state over the economy and market and the rest of your life, right? The only difference is communists wanted to like absolutely fucking annihilate the family and turn everything into like this new over progress, human evolution into like absolute abnormality, right? It was a war against normal. Whereas like the National Socialists, yeah, but the National Socialists and the Nazis and all that shit, they were pretty much on board with a lot of the Nazi or the communist ideas for how to manage a state, except that they left the family alone. They left you like some degree of normality in place.
I mean,
so if people are coming through this with the same authoritarian lens, the only difference is that level of normality and like the promise of like a wife and kids and all that shit versus the promise of like fucking ethical non-monogamy, polycule bullshit.
But
so it's where you line up on that is the dividing factor.
But the thing is, like in practice, like the Soviet communism was not like a bunch of blue-haired genderqueer polycules. That was stuff they would have said was like, proof of the decadence of the West. It was illegal to be gay in the Soviet Union, right? There was some thinking along those lines perhaps in the beginning, but it got crushed under reality and under managing a police state. So
right,
communism was never what it was supposed to be cracked up to be, even from the start.
Right, but here's where shit changed, because that was the Russianization of communism, which was a German fucking philosophy, if you will. What you got? So the Russians still had to deal with Russians, right? And the Soviet Union was in charge of the Russians. Well, the Soviet Union isn't around to contain and guide the communists that are right all around you in America and in the West and are running rampant and are actually like gaining political power and have political power now. So that's going on unchecked. That might be a lot closer to the original communist ideology than the Soviet Union itself was. And the Soviet Union and China and Cambodia and all that shit tried to get it to that way, but they realized it was like a dead end for the area that they were dealing with and the population that they were dealing with, and abandoned it later.
Did Marx write about stuff like that?
Oh yeah, he was a hell of a degenerate. He was also a hell of an anti-Semite, which
he is German.
Yeah, but that it flies in the face of the Groypers insist that communism is inherently Jewish, which is bullshit. Demonstrable bullshit, because again, they don't know what the hell they're talking about and they don't want to know. So they won't actually research this shit. They'll just read Carl Schmitt or some such bullshit, some such idiocy.
Yeah, the people that are trying to blame this on a lack of ethnic purity, like white Europeans invented all this shit, okay? From the French Revolution to communism and like critical race, what we now know is critical race theory and critical theory. That got started in late 19th century Germany under their Volk nationalism and their Volk romanticism movements. And I think it was W.E. Du Bois went to Berlin and studied under one of these guys for a while, and he brought some of that stuff back and started injecting it into U.S. politics. It's like it comes back to Germany being history's greatest criminals, is what I'm saying.
The whole critical theory thing also was really brought into this country by the Frankfurt School, which was in large part an extension of Antonio Gramsci's idea of cultural Marxism. Hey, the proletarians aren't rising up and creating this workers' paradise because it sucks. So how do we change their culture to trick them into creating it anyway? And
it's crazy.
Again, Gramsci was an Italian, so not everything can be part of the German. It was the Germans that disseminated it the most.
Yeah, it took an Italian ironically, to make a German philosophy actually have teeth. Same with like Mussolini, right? Like they're the ones that fucking actually made it feasible, and well, to an extent, and then the Germans ate that shit.
Yeah.
But so yeah, like I said, I started a few years ago. I started doing in the internet rabbit hole on this stuff. I started calling myself an internet zoologist because I was just seeing. I got these categories of these people, and it hasn't all been just because I have a terrible hobby. That's most of it. I have a terrible, emotionally unhealthy hobby that I really should stop, but I can't because it's like smoking.
It's better than anime.
Right. It is better than anime. Yes. Suck it, weebs. Yeah. But it's not all for nothing because it helps to keep an ear to the ground for this stuff. Because, yeah, a lot of this stuff just starts on the internet. And it's just internet weirdos talking about their weird bullshit. But sometimes it does manifest in the real world. It does have real world consequences. Like some of these guys who, if you want to get into the whole, one segment of this is the whole post-liberal movement where we're going to move past, even like classical liberalism because it's obviously failed. So we're going to move into that. Well, you know who buys into that, or at least said he bought into it, was J.D. Vance. He might be the vice president and then the leader of the Republican Party. So internet bullshit can spill over into the real world.
Okay.
So it's worth it paying some attention to, but at the same time, again, do not work yourself up into anxiety. It's not over if you lose an election or if it's not over, guys. It'll be okay.
And it's only over if you stop fighting. And sometimes the best way to fight, again, is we're still in the battle of ideas here. And certain ideas are demonstrable bullshit and they need to be called out that way.
And people also want like the quick solution. But as we pointed out countless times on here before, it took them the better part of a century to get where they are, to where they're ramming it down your throat. It's going to take just as long to undo the damage.
Yeah, this is a big
and even as we see the tide starting to turn in some places, there's the temptation to take a deep sigh and relax. Can't. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and so you always have to be ready for that to push back, because there's always going to be somebody who wants to take that away from you.
I think that's what one of the things that started pissing me off so much about some of this fringe right radicalism that's function, like on policy wise, they're almost identical to leftists, except for they disagree about the trans stuff and religion, right? It's like if a bunch of Bernie bros were like religious fundamentalists in a lot of cases. They have leftist political and leftist economic policies. Like they're all cheering on Viktor Orban in Hungary because he did price controls. Well, now Kamala Harris talked about price controls. Like, oh yeah, those are bad again. Like, yeah, they were always bad. Doesn't matter who tries them; they don't work.
Yeah.
But what bugged me about it is, I think we are just getting to a point where I think the progressive movement, the woke movement, the social justice, whatever decade you want to, whatever label you want to give them from whatever era, they kind of shot their wad. They overextended in 2020, right? They were letting people riot and burn down cities and bailing them out of jail, and that they wanted to abolish police. That wasn't popular, right? They're running away from that now. We finally got to the point where we start to push back on, like, make meaningful pushback on some of this shit after years. And then these idiots just want to like go full retard and be the caricature of an evil conservative as written by like somebody for like a bad movie, and they're going to ruin it. They're going to blow it for everybody because they can't. Yeah, I'm rambling, but I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. It's like, you guys, we can win here. We can actually make some real progress. But you're not going to make progress if you freak out all the normal people, because you can't be normal because you want to post your Pepe in an SS uniform memes. Guys, that's not helping.
No. It's interesting. The CIA of all agencies has as their motto that the truth shall set you free. The actual quote comes from long before the CIA was ever even an idea, and it actually goes much deeper than anything we're talking about tonight. But it is true. The truth will set you free. And in many cases, it'll set you free from ideological capture in any particular direction, because you come to understand that some things just don't change, and they just need to be adjusted for. Other things can be pushed back against and have to be.
That's funny you bring up the truth shall set you free quote, because I have a similar quote. It's been pinned on my fucking Twitter for like 5 years now. I'm okay with being on the wrong side of history, or I'd rather be on the wrong side of history than being on the wrong side of the truth.
Yep.
I mean, that is the thing too. It's about Twitter is not a real place, and it kind of is, or we have these different competing worldviews, but there is an objective reality, real world that will come punch you in the face sooner or later, right? And
the gods of the comic book headings, as
a lot of these things can continue on for a long time because America is a humongous system. 330 million people, the largest economy to ever exist in the world, right? There's a big delay on feedback. That's why cultural change seems like it takes a long time. Even though sometimes it can be pretty rapid, but it takes a long time to filter down.
It also takes a long time to make like new fucking movies and video games and shit. So like they're starting from like 4 years prior to whenever it gets released.
Yeah, they can't, like, pop culture can't keep up with the memes. So,
Yeah.
but it also can't keep up with like a lot of current events either. When after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I was getting my hair cut, and this is a few months into it, right? The girl cutting my hair asked me, "So is that thing in Ukraine still going on?" And it kind of made me like think, because for all the discourse about it on the internet, all the constant arguing and think about, the average American didn't know and didn't care. And to the extent they were aware of it, they're like, yeah, well, Russia shouldn't have invaded Ukraine. That was bad.
They shouldn't have invaded Georgia either. I didn't know Georgia was planning on joining NATO.
No, nobody mentioned. None of these Russian apologists in Ukraine about Ukraine mentioned Georgia. But I guess 2008 is too far back to actually remember.
I mean, some of them weren't adults in 2008, so, you know.
But that's where those of us who are older and who do have longer memories need to step up, because
I wasn't a fucking adult in 2008. Like I was at the Marine Corps recruiting office. Like we were just fucking running around the parking lot and that shit for the PFT, and we were cracking jokes about how we were gonna get fucking deployed to Georgia instead of Iraq, like fucking dumbasses.
Well, original Ghost Recon.
Well, yeah, it was. We were making so many Call of Duty and Battlefield jokes. Like, I guess we're fighting the Russians this time. Yeah, it'll be just like the video games.
I will say, it was kind of funny that when the invasion of Ukraine started, there were places on the map that I recognized from the campaign of U.S. Navy fighters from 1994, where the Russians invade Ukraine. Right, like Petrovsk and Sevastopol. Like I knew these places from that flight simulator from the 90s.
See, I recognized the place from Stalker because it was Escape from Chernobyl, and people were very like afraid for like a month about Chernobyl being fucking like re-exploded or some shit.
The zone is still contained. Don't worry, everything is fine.
Yeah. The elephant's foot is not going to come for you.
The monolith is still there. We don't know what it does. We don't ask questions. Just leave it alone. Guys, we are at 2 hours, and we are getting
Yeah.
more than usual. I think it's been a long day for everybody, so we might want to wrap it up. Also, I have to drive to Wisconsin tomorrow, so.
Ooh, gross.
I know, right?
It's been.
Do you know how many Germans are in Wisconsin?
You know how many like Packer fans are in Wisconsin, like with their giant spider invasions, and it's a horrible place.
Well, it's been a little bit more of a grimmer episode than usual, but
you know, and
we all figured it needed to be addressed.
This is such an elaborate topic that we could spend hours. Like, I could spend hours going through my meme folders and screenshots, just showing people what the hell I'm talking about, and then nobody would care because sensible people don't have this ridiculous hobby of mine, and I respect that. And I wish I could from you.
Mike's like that meme where he's like standing in the corner at the party and he's just like, they don't know how many retards are on the internet. Everybody else is dancing just like, yeah, we do. Like, we don't care though.
That's ridiculous. I don't get invited to parties.
No, that makes it worse. It's your party.
Online. Damn, there's a lot of them.
Which one? If it gives anybody any solace, because like as Pete said, it was a grimmer episode where we were just kind of like bitching about the black pillars instead of refuting them. Well, we kind of refuted them, but the mere fact that we have reclaimed retard as a usable word, because I remember the 90s, I remember the aughts, I remember the 10s. Okay, we're back, baby. Like, you just have to keep fighting. Okay.
You know, it's funny. I saw a review of the 1998 Godzilla movie, right? For Godzilla, and there's a scene where like the reporter is running off chasing the giant CGI iguana with his camera, and his girlfriend is like, "Joey, you retard!" And the commentator was like, "Ooh, that's, you tell this is a little dated." I'm like, no, that was just normal humor back then.
Yeah, and also it's Frank Azaria. He is retarded. Like, it's completely appropriate.
Like, hey, you special need. It doesn't roll off the tongue, you know.
No, it doesn't. All right, folks. Yeah, if there's any interest, I can probably put out a reading list for this sort of stuff too. It might take you a long time to get through it, but in the long run, it may be worth it.
Links in the description.
Oh God, we need to.
No, I haven't put it together that far yet. Well, I can though.
It's gonna have one of those link trees, but it doesn't go to OnlyFans. It'll be like, oh.
OnlyFans of the truth.
And on that note, leave
Pokemon,
it to Coop.
Go to the polls.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead.
I was gonna say before you end this, I'm gonna just keep doing them. So.
Yeah.
Well, let Pete push out the 19th book he's published this year. So.
Oh yeah, you got a new one.
Yeah, new one came out back on Saturday. Start of a new series. Kind of hard to shoehorn it in with the rest of this conversation, but as Pavo John named it right there, Spheres of Influence. But yeah, military science fiction, intrigue,
Is it about
war.
propaganda?
There's a little bit in there somewhere, but it's mostly intrigue, combat, and the unknown sticking his nose into your proxy war. And there's more to come.
And you should anyone who sees this live or in the future, go buy this book. Go buy it. Yeah, you should do that. Even if it's
buy this book. It's the best book. I've read this book. I love this book. It's the best book. And nobody knows better books than I do. And Pete, he is a tremendous author. He writes the best books. Trust me, his books, they're great.
And if you're
everybody buy this book. Actually getting a little bit better as he goes on, but that doesn't make it good.
If you're seeing this in the far future and we won the robot war, you should definitely go read this book because it predicts it. I don't know if it does or not, but
No, it doesn't.
We didn't find out. If we lost the robot war, well, machine overlords.
It may be a war. It may be a warning for some things to come, or it may not be.
Yeah, like Voodoo War 2.
We don't talk about the Voodoo Wars yet.
All right, folks.
Have a good night, everybody.
We will see you all next month.